In today's episode, we will look into the difference between written constitution and unwritten constitution. Now let's try and take an example and try to understand what is written constitution. We'll take example of India. What happened in India? In 1946, there was a constituent assembly which was formed. Constituent assembly was formed. This constituent assembly had some eminent people in it. These people went to different countries, and went in the sense they studied the constitutions of different countries. Like they studied constitutions of USA, then France, and then they studied UK, New Zealand, various other countries. They studied the constitutions of all these countries. They pulled out various provisions from them. They made modifications to them, and then after making modifications were made in such a way that it would fit the Indian scenario at that point in time, and then stitched together all these modifications, and then they made our constitution. That is, Indian constitution was made. So technically they bought in various constitutions provisions, they stitched them together. That is, like they systematically arranged all these provisions into one single legal document, and this single legal document became our constitution. So this is the process of written constitution here. Okay, and now let's look at what happens in unwritten constitution. We'll take the example of UK. UK does not have a written constitution. What do I mean by they do not have written constitution is that let's assume that in 1600, sometime in 1600, there were a couple of ordinances or laws passed. These documents were kept, and then again in 1700 something had happened. There were various provisions that were made. These provisions were once again kept, and then 1800 the same thing happened, 1900 the same thing happened, so on. Now all these documents are collectively kept together, and these documents have actually become the constitution of the UK. So that's technically like the unwritten constitution. In unwritten constitutions, so technically, as we see, the written constitution is actually enacted after studying various constitutions, getting the provisions out of them, various provisions, various laws, all those things, making modifications to those, and then our constitution was formed, and this constitution was enacted at some point in time. Whereas in unwritten constitution, the constitution has evolved over a period of time, and it is not codified into a single document. Here, since the constitution is formed over a period of time, the constitution becomes supreme, and the constitution is above all technically. So whereas in the unwritten constitution, the parliament is supreme. Now when we say constitution is supreme, so constitution sits on top. Constitution will define what the various parts of the government will be. So their parliament will be somewhere below it, hence parliament will be below it. So if any parliamentary law is not in sync with the constitutional law, or if it is outside the framework of the constitution, then it can be declared unconstitutional or null or void. Whereas in case of unwritten constitution, the parliament is supreme, so the parliamentary law can never be unconstitutional. Here the parliament is supreme and constitution is below it. So constitutional law can never be parliamentary laws can never be unconstitutional. Now in written constitution, what happens is there is a very clear demarcation between the constitutional laws and the other laws. The other laws are the legal ones which are formulated by the parliament, or ordinances passed by the president and things like that. There is a very clear demarcation. Whereas in case of unwritten constitution, there is no such demarcation, because whatever every enactment of the parliament, eventually it'll go on, it'll join the book of constitution. It becomes part of a constitution. Example of written constitution is India, USA, and various other examples. There are a lot of examples here, whereas when it comes to unwritten constitution, very few countries have unwritten constitution. One of them is UK, the other one is New Zealand. So this is the basic fundamental difference between written constitution and unwritten constitution.